So many people have held off on buying a new GPU because we know that prices have been horrible for so long, but if you're just checking back into it, you might have realized prices are way back down now. GPUs are affordable, GPUs you might actually want to buy. But wait, which is the right one? It's confusing. I honestly think buying GPUs right now is more confusing than it's ever been, with things to think about like ray tracing, DLSS, FSR, all sorts of stuff. I'm gonna help you guys out so you don't make the wrong decision, but first, a quick word from the sponsor. My wife's laptop has a really annoying problem, and the sponsor to today's video, GIISSMO, with their 9-in-1 USB-C hub, by the way, free giveaway happening, link in the description, check that out, you could win one of these. Anyway, so the problem that this laptop runs into is the outputs. So a lot of ultra thin and light style laptops like this Dell XPS 13, but a lot of MacBook Airs, MacBook M1s, Asus ZenBooks, the Lenovo Yogas, they have just limited outputs like this USB Type-C. I've got one on each side, but my wife a lot of times needs to plug something in that's not USB Type-C or wants to output to a monitor. There are no monitor outputs besides that. So what can you do? Well, that's where these USB Type-C adapters come in. Let's unbox this thing and show that it works. All right, so here's the box, and on it we can see a lot of the product details. You can see that we get USB 3.1 ports, as well as 2.0 ports, and we have an HDMI 1 and an HDMI 2, with HDMI 1 supporting up to 4K 30 Hz. While the HDMI 2 goes up to 1080p 60 Hz. It should allow us to do a triple screen setup where we're using the laptop screen in the center and then two external displays on the edges. Now, what do we have here? So here's the actual USB Type-C cord. It comes nicely packaged in the box here. And here, I really like this, by the way. It just adds a lot of flexibility. So obviously the laptop I'm working with here is going to have that Type-C port, but I really like that it has this attached on the cable here, an adapter to go to a USB Type-A port 3.0. So if I wanted to use this on my desktop PC or something that didn't have a USB Type-C port, I can actually do that as well, which I really, really like. So that's the overall packaging. Everything seems to have arrived just fine. We've got our various ports, and everything seems to be in working order. Everything is nicely labeled, so you can tell which port is which on the bottom. So everything seems great. Let's plug it in and see if we can get some external displays up and running. All right, and I'm super happy. We got two screens up, so it's a triple screen display now, working perfectly 1080p 60 on both displays. My wife will be happy, and you will be too if you check out the free giveaway in the description. So first, let's set some ground rules for this exploration. I'm not gonna be looking for deals that you have to hunt and just be on your PC at the exact right moment in time, get that Discord notification, that kind of a thing. Because I think for a lot of people, you just have to buy things at the prices where they'll sit in stock at the time that you can actually buy it. Now, prices are still changing a bit, but where I'm going to look here is actually at PC Part Picker. Now, why is that? Well, PC Part Picker searches a number of major well-known retailers for GPUs, and you can search the prices high to low among the various retailers at the same time. Now, it's not perfectly up to date, so like this isn't the best way to hunt for those split-second deals, but it does give us a really good idea of what the best prices are that things are actually just like sitting at in the normal market. Now, let me shrink myself out of the way a little bit. Anyway. So what are we doing here? So I've set this, I've just gone to choose a video card here, and let's talk about the first ones I want to compare. First of all, if your budget is really low, the lowest priced new generation GPU is the RX 6500 XT from AMD, and it is below its MSRP now. It's down to $180. But I've got to say that you would also want to seriously consider looking at the used market. This GPU has a lot of major trade-offs. It doesn't have an encoder on PCIe Gen 3 motherboards. When you run over your VRAM limit, and this only has 4 gigabytes of VRAM, you can run into extremely decreased performance. So in general, I would say at this price point, there's not a lot of great options. I'm personally going to just recommend spend more money, but you could also explore the used market. Now, from Nvidia, the cheapest new GPU is the RTX 3050. And let me tell you why. First of all, it's not a 2050, it's a 3050. Let me tell you why I don't recommend buying this GPU, at least at the prices that it sits at. If you can find this GPU at its MSRP of $250, which is possible, I got mine off of EVGA's website directly, but generally when they're available at that MSRP, they sell out very quickly. So this is one of those deals you'd have to hunt. When they're just sitting in stock, they've been sitting in stock usually over $300. Now, I think this is a terrible choice because there's so many better options. First of all, if you're willing to go with AMD, the RX 6600 actually costs less. Now, I believe this $285 price point here is factoring in a $15 mail-in rebate, and people have mixed reactions to the MSI rebates, but even if you're not relying on a rebate, you can get these for $300. And it's going to significantly outperform the RTX 3050 at everything besides ray tracing. I think that, first of all, I own these two cards, and I would absolutely recommend buying the RX 6600 over the RTX 3050 at, especially at even pricing. But I would even pay a little bit more for the RX 6600, which is selling below its MSRP, although MSRPs are kind of meaningless. What matters is what are the cards actually selling for. Now, the only place where you will see the RTX 3050 outperform the RX 6600 is in ray tracing, or if you're using DLSS. But here's the thing, these cards are going to be targeted at 1080p gaming. They're going to be a big stretch to try to use at 1440p in more graphically demanding titles. And at 1080p, I don't think DLSS looks that great. It's not that you can't use it, but I'd be trying to play the games at their native resolution. And ray tracing takes too much of a performance hit on the RTX 3050, which is already just struggling to run games, at least the more graphically demanding ones, at their maximum settings. And you're already having to turn down normal non-ray traced settings. So I don't think factoring DLSS and ray tracing into this particular price point makes a lot of sense. So I think not only is the RX 6600 a no-brainer over the 3050 when it costs less, like I said, I think it's even worth a little bit more. Now, there are some factors to consider when you're buying AMD over Nvidia. The one thing that people think about is streaming. The encoder for Nvidia looks better at the low bit rates that you'd be using for live streaming. And so I do think if live streaming is a huge thing that you care about, then maybe consider the Nvidia card, even though everything else about it, its actual just rasterized performance is straight up worse. Also, there are some professional applications, non-gaming related, that do work better on Nvidia. The program is just written for Nvidia's CUDA core acceleration, so that's another thing to take into account. But for just straight up gaming and you're not live streaming it, the 6600 is the way to go. Okay, so what if you do need an Nvidia card and you're like, well, this 3050 doesn't seem like that great of a deal? Well, I'd actually consider the RTX 2060 if you have to, because the main downside here compared to the 3050 is the VRAM. You lose 2 gigabytes of VRAM, the 3050 had 8 gigabytes. But not only can we find these for a little bit less money, but I mean realistically about the same price as a 3050. But while I don't have a 2060 to show you my own personal benchmarks, if you just pull up a performance chart, we can see that the 3050 compared to the 2060, the 2060 is about 16% faster. And it will have ray tracing and DLSS support as well. So if you have to go with Nvidia at this price point, I would seriously consider the 2060 instead of the 3050. Although I will say again, only having 6 gigabytes is a pretty big downside. So again, if you don't absolutely need it to be Nvidia, I still recommend the RX 6600, which does have the 8 gigabytes of VRAM, and at rasterized performance usually is a little bit ahead of the 2060, although the 2060 is much closer than the 3050 was. Okay, so that's my recommendation for 1080p getting in the door, gaming at high or even ultra settings. 60 frames per second easily, you're not gonna have to worry too much about it. Now, what if you want a little bit more headroom? Then I think going for the RX 6600 XT. Now notice the XT version is actually not the same as the non-XT version. The price jumps up to $360. It is a big price jump, but you actually gain a significant amount of performance. You might actually be surprised what the little XT at the end gets you. I don't have an XT to compare with my own benchmark against my 6600 non-XT. But if we pull up this performance chart, we see a 19% performance improvement according to Tech Power Up, and this is fairly accurate. On a game-by-game basis, you know, it could be different. But in general, it's going to be a significant performance jump for that little bit of extra money. Now, you might consider going with an RTX 3060 if you, again, have to go with Nvidia. But here's the problem. The RTX 3060 costs $400 for the cheapest models right now. Its MSRP is $329. It's supposed to be cheaper, but it's not. And while the 3060 will have better ray tracing performance than the 6600 XT, and the ray tracing performance is getting to the point where it might be considered usable, especially in games that have a lighter ray tracing implementation. For me personally, I would still usually hold off on ray tracing at this performance tier just to get the better performance. Now, the 3060 also has 12 gigabytes of VRAM is nice, but I don't think 8 gigabytes is really a problem when we're targeting 1080p gaming. So, you know, you might consider paying the extra bit of money for the 3060 in rasterized performance, so non-ray trace performance. In many titles, it will underperform compared to the 6600 XT from AMD, but you might have a brand preference there. And like I said, this does have DLSS, better ray tracing, and more VRAM. So what if we want to play 1440p? Well, the 3060 and the 6600 XT could get away with 1440p gaming, but it's going to be more of like a medium settings and using DLSS or FSR if you want to play with heavier settings. So I would say I would seriously consider going with, well, what I would like to recommend would be a 3060 Ti, which is supposed to cost $400, because remember, MSRPs don't really mean anything in terms of what things actually sell for. So the problem with the 3060 Ti, which I think is a very solid 1440p card and would be the best performance per dollar if it was available at its MSRP, is that it's $132 over its MSRP. So what are we going to do? Well, the AMD equivalent, and I promise I'm not just here to recommend AMD cards, and at the higher end, you'll see. So, but 1440p, I think the 6700 XT gives you a solid 1440p gaming experience. I've got one I've tested out pretty thoroughly, and I think you could be very, very happy with this card. And at $475, and getting 12 gigabytes of VRAM compared to the 3060 Ti at 8 gigabytes of VRAM, I think there's a lot of reasons to recommend the cheaper graphics card here. Now, there has been the updated version, the 6750 XT. The problem is that one jumps up to more expensive than the 3060 Ti. Now, it still has the VRAM advantage, and it is a bit faster. The 3060 Ti performs very similarly to the baseline 6700 XT, although if you're not including ray tracing, I think the 6700 XT is generally a bit faster, although it varies title by title. Now for me, I'd save the money and just go with the 6700 XT personally. Now, what if you want to go all the way up to a 3070? Well, the problem with the 3070 is that it's generally significantly overpriced. Right now we can see $620. That's a lot. Now, I was able to get this Asus Dual OC for about $570, but then again, like I said, that's finding a deal on it. So yeah, I think at that price point, I think really for a value-conscious 1440p build, the 3060 Ti or the even more value-oriented 6700 XT is going to be the way to go there. And I'd probably go with the 6700 XT, again, if you don't need NVIDIA-specific applications or anything like that. Now, if you're going to go past this point, there is the RTX 3070 Ti, but paying $700 for an 8GB graphics card right now, to me, is a bit of a stretch when you could, and it's only a little bit faster than 3070, and honestly not even that much crazy faster compared to like the 3060 Ti that we were looking at. Like, let's look at the 3060 Ti as a baseline here for a second. So we saw the 3060 Ti for, what was it, $530? So you could get your 3070 Ti, which is 25% faster, but you're going all the way up to $700. It's a lot more money, and I don't know, guys. I really wish these had a bit more VRAM, and then I feel like the longevity would be a bit better there. So at this price point, and if you're wanting to push into like higher refresh rate 1440p gaming or even into 4K gaming, I really think we want to start looking at either the 6800 XT, which, yeah, sometimes is available for under $800. So, you know, rather than spending $700 on a 3070 Ti, I would rather spend the extra $70 on a 6800 XT to get double the VRAM capacity and significantly faster performance. Now, the 3070 Ti versus the 6800 XT, we are getting about 18% better performance here. Now, this is measuring at 4K. If you're playing at 1440p, the 6800 XT is going to have even more of a performance lead there. And the 6800 XT is a GPU I would recommend for high refresh rate 1440p or even 4K 60 FPS gaming. And FSR 1.0 looks reasonable at its quality setting at 4K, although DLSS I think still does a better job, and we're starting to see more games listed with FSR 2.0 support coming, which looks quite good at 4K and is a very strong DLSS competitor. Now, here's the thing. My problem with recommending just the 6800 XT is that the RTX 3080 has been creeping into this price point. Now, getting this price down below 800 on this MSI model does include relying on a mail-in rebate, and that can take a while to process, and some people claim that they don't get honored. But this is the 12GB model. So in my opinion, if you can get the 12GB model for $800 or less, I really would recommend buying it over the 6800 XT. So I think grab the 12GB RTX 3080 if you want 4K gaming or high refresh rate 1440p gaming. I don't think it makes sense to buy that 3070 Ti when it's less than $100 to upgrade to a significantly better GPU. And again, you can even get this Nvidia GPU here at that price point. So, and if I'm going to specifically talk about 4K gaming, for 4K, I do think Nvidia does make a bit more sense here. Also, when you're getting into this performance class, the 3080, if you're playing at 1440p, I think does have enough ray tracing performance for it to be worthwhile. At 4K, I think getting ray tracing requires such aggressive uses of DLSS that I generally still don't think it's good enough, but that's honestly how I feel about the 3090. I think really for 4K with ray tracing, you're going to want to wait for the next generation of GPUs. Now, I really don't recommend buying anything higher than the RTX 3080 12GB. Now, the reason is, the pricing gets kind of out of control. If you want to go to a 3080 Ti, which does not perform much better, you're jumping all the way up to $1,050. But guys, you're jumping up almost a couple $100. It's well, more than a couple $100 if you're getting that under $800 3080 12GB. Like, it doesn't make a lot of sense, in my opinion, at all. And then jumping up into 3090s, it's just crazy money. So I'm not going to recommend anything above a 12GB RTX 3080. If you really don't care about ray tracing or you really want to go AMD, the RX 6900 has been coming in below its MSRP a lot lately. So the 6900 XT for 860 might be worth considering if you really don't need any Nvidia features or weren't too worried about ray tracing performance. But that's about the cap there from me here. So hopefully this was useful for you guys. Quick recap, basically I'm recommending for 1080p gaming, the RX 6600, unless you have to have Nvidia, in which case I think the RTX 2060 might be worth considering over the 3050 at the current pricing levels. For 1440p, just targeting kind of 60 FPS gameplay, I think that the RX 6700 XT makes a lot of sense from a value perspective. You could jump up to a 3060 Ti, but you're spending a lot more to get less VRAM and just to get a bit better ray tracing and access to DLSS. But again, if streaming or whatever productivity applications, again, you might just want to go with that Nvidia card, but you're paying significantly more for it. At 4K gaming, I'm recommending the RTX 3080 12GB model if you can get a good price on it like we're seeing here. And maybe going up to a 6900 XT if you really want just kind of the fastest, almost the fastest rasterized performance and you're not too into ray tracing. Going beyond these cards to those 3080 Ti's and 3090s, I just doesn't make any kind of a value sense. You can do it if you want to, but I'm not going to recommend it. Hope all of you have an excellent day.